Welcome back to CineMeghan Theaters, week 14. Happy Easter as well to those who celebrate. We just finished watching Grey Gardens, which was directed by, we have a few directors. It was directed by David Maysles, Albert Maysles, Ellen Hovde, and Muffie Meyer, and was released in 1975. Just some fun facts about the movie itself as well as the subjects. The film follows a mother and daughter, Big Edie and Little Edie. They go based on they go by those nicknames because they're both named Edith Beale. Big Edie was born in 1895 and died in 1977, and Little Edie was born in 1917 and passed away in 2002. Just another fun fact about these two women, they were ex-socialites at the time of this movie's filming and resided at Grey Gardens, which is a residential home in the village of East Hampton, New York, which is out on Long Island and much farther away from West Hampton than I thought it would be, because I went to West Hampton this past weekend and thought it would be fun to go and like drive to the house and maybe take a quick photo. From the street or whatever. And then it was another 50 minutes away, and I was like, I'll just go home. But they, just to kind of give you a background of what level of socialite status they were at one point in time, Big Edie was Jackie Kennedy's aunt, so that makes Little Edie and Jackie Kennedy cousins. And Jackie Kennedy was married to former President John F. Kennedy. So after the filming of Grey Gardens, 2 years later, Big Edie did pass away, as I mentioned, in 1977, and Little Edie sold the house in 1979 for $220,000, which would be approximately $775,000 in 2019. Since then, it's been sold a few times, most recently in 2017 for $15.5 million. I believe the house is about 28 rooms. And from the movie, it's very evident to tell that the house is very decrepit. And that's kind of the main, not the purpose of the film, but like the purpose of the filmmaking, like that's what sparked the interest with these directors, was that Suffolk County officials actually went after the Beales to be like, you gotta clean up your house or you need to move because it's not up to code. And for anyone who's familiar with the Hamptons, East Hampton is definitely the bougiest, I would argue, of the Hamptons. It's a very high standards, and with holes in the walls, them feeding raccoons, having about 50 feral cats living with them, fleas were everywhere. I can understand why there was a health concern with this house. But yeah, so that's just kind of the background of why, for instance, these directors picked the subject matter. So yeah, it is a documentary, this film. Specifically, the film movement that is mostly associated with of the time is called direct cinema. Direct cinema was a documentary film movement that originated, it's said like 1958 to 1962, and then it was basically the use with new inventions, with smaller technology that allowed for a smaller crew set, and so it gave filmmakers the ability to have that fly on the wall aspect of filmmaking. Paul Monaco, he is a film critic. He has stated quote, direct cinema is the result of two predominant and related factors: the desire for new cinematic realism and the development of the equipment necessary to achieving that desire, end quote. So yeah, kind of going off the facts again. You didn't have heavy cameras anymore to film. There wasn't digital yet, so this film was shot on film, it being in the 70s, but it wasn't like, you didn't need like two or three people to hold the camera or to even set up the camera. It could be handheld. Um, yeah, so, and then also to kind of go off the fly on the wall aspect of this method of documentary filmmaking, it's very obvious, just from watching the film, that it kind of, this movie, like, even the filmmakers themselves are almost watching the action as it's occurring and just kind of happen to have a camera on them. There's an absence of talking heads, and questions, other than, I mean, there were a few questions in this movie that the directors did ask Big and Little Edie, um, but it wasn't necessarily to skew a conversation in one way or another. Most of the time, it even was just like, um, them answering a question too if they spoke. Little Edie throughout the film asks the directors a lot of questions, and they just kind of answer because she's just having a conversation with them, but she's in control of that conversation. So, yeah. Um, I hate to throw you under the bus, but I'm joined with Vernon tonight. I'm curious if you were able to kind of like see how this documentary might is like a little different from like the tradition, like, not tradition, I don't want to use that word traditional, but more popular documentary styles where it's like the talking heads and like leading into different acts of that documentary.
Yeah. So for me, it was interesting because, like in the beginning, there's the newspaper clippings of like you said, the story about the house being decrepit and stuff like that. So I thought, because like I went into this not knowing what it was about, and I thought that's what the movie was about to be about.
Mm-hmm.
And you obviously see it because it's in the house; they're filming in the house.
Yeah.
But this documentary, like other than the clippings, that this documentary had absolutely nothing to do with the beginning. And
Mm-hmm.
usually like with documentaries, like it's a very clear um like purpose and like what they're like everything has a purpose, everything is shot. Like every interview, like talking head or whatever, um B-roll is to have a conversation about whatever the documentary is about. And this, it just felt like it was a fly on the wall with these two women, and they kind of found like a story just about a mother and daughter
Mm-hmm.
who are somewhat codependent of each other, even
Oh,
though
extremely.
yeah, and the mother is just like very verbally abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that was just interesting seeing how it was really just kind of like they went there, and it's kind of cool that they went there looking for one thing and they just like freestyled it and made this.
Oh yeah, because yeah, like I said earlier too, where it's like all that background information about the house kind of sparked, I believe it was David and Albert Maysles' interest in going to Grey Gardens to go film what, like, why is Suffolk County like after these people? Um, but even like they've called like Big Edie and Little Edie, whenever they refer to Suffolk County like coming to like to them and being like, you need to like fix up your house, like they refer to it as like a raid, um which might, I wasn't there, might be extreme to describe it as such, but I I don't think the house was ever a concern for them, especially like you see it even like little Edie's like feeding the raccoons bread and like pouring milk on the floor for the cats, and like even Big Edie's mattress, like they don't care about material things to such a high extent. um yeah, and then just going off of that relationship of how they both kind of think this similar, and then also blame each. I noticed like it seems like little Edie blames a lot of how like her life ended up being because of her mom. Like even she says like the last guy who proposed to her, the mother ran him away, and it's like, well, call him. Like if that's the case, you know what I mean? Um, if she really wanted to get engaged to this guy, she also had a choice to go after him. But I think it's just like that codependency, and then they're also butting heads like 95% of the time. Um, but yeah, I as I was reading up on this, this film has caused controversy since its release, specifically because of the fly on the wall aspect of the filmmaking process. Because some people are there's a line between exploitation and empathy towards these characters, and so it's been argued that this film focuses more on the exploitation of these two women. Um, I will just give this also background information. Before they start filming this movie, they got permission from both Big and Little Edie, and I believe they were also paid. Like the estate went over like a contract, and they did agree. However, they did agree to this movie because from what I read was that they were in dire need of money. Um, I don't know how much they were paid to star in this documentary. Um,
Yeah,
but
that was a question I had because I was curious as to why they would have agreed to it, especially if like the leading angle was going to be about the house, which they obviously like
mhm.
felt very threatened by the Suffolk County like coming and like raiding in their words. So that makes sense. But also that I think them agreeing to it, I think kind of just like I don't know, the ethics part seems kind of wonky if like they agreed to do it, but also I think the part that the where ethics should be called into question is them being paid.
Mhm.
And I don't know cuz I wonder if their relationship got a new strain on it
Hmm.
when with the cameras there because I like throughout the like even though it's a documentary it almost plays out like um a narrative film where the tension just kind of builds up until that last scene, those last few scenes where little Edie is singing and then Big E really just like can't handle it and she just
Oh yeah, Little Edie like breaks down fully in front of the
yeah like
camera.
that's what
Like
I'm yeah
it's
like
almost disturbing to watch. Like that final scene where I'm like, I feel like I should excuse myself. Like, um, sorry, did I interrupt you?
no that was
Oh,
pretty
okay.
much my
Yeah, so I'm kind of like on the fence, I guess. I think I have to take when I think of like, oh, is it exploitation or is it does the film have more empathy towards these women? Um, I think I'm on the fence, and I have to go through the film as a whole, not as a whole, but like scene by scene. Because also, it seems like okay, that last scene, for instance, um, it wasn't set up to end up that way. Like that was just how the tension built up, and then little Edie is crying because her mom is just yelling at her for singing, which like it's not that big of a deal. Like and then saying like, "Oh, you suck as a singer," and then like that's why this guy wouldn't marry you, and she's like, "I wanted to marry him," and then it just like builds up, just or it was still organically, and but like it was so personal that it feels weird watching it. Um, but then I'm thinking like even like when little Edie dances, I don't
yeah
feel like I should excuse myself because it the way the film plays out, I I have like a 90%, like I'm pretty sure that she was like, oh, let me dance for you, because also this throughout the movie she's like low key like rehearsing for that scene because she wants to show the cameras how she would dance when she was younger. So like that just seems like a genuine like, yes, I want to share this with the world. But like her crying, I don't know if she wanted to share that with the world. Um, Yeah, did you think of like were there any other scenes kind of like that, or do you agree or disagree with like the dancing scene, for instance?
Um, yeah, there's definitely the dancing scene because she was very literally performing for the camera.
Yeah.
Like she came down the stairs all dressed up with the flag and kind of just like did her dance number and
And
yeah, I don't.
I think that
I think
was
it was,
also just a little Edie. Like I know it was a performance, but like it was her organically performing. Like I, you know, she volunteered to do it. Um, and I don't know. I like it's not too odd of a scene where I felt like uncomfortable because I was just like, all right, she's doing something that she really likes to enjoy. Like it's still kind of a little weird because you have like I don't know, like a 50 some year old woman just kind of like dancing, waving the flag. Um, so it's like not what I would be expecting, but also like I would expect it because it's a movie about her, like, and she's like the star of it.
and now that I think about it, the fly on the wall aspect is
Mhm.
kind of interesting because typically when you think of fly on the wall, it's kind of just the the subjects are just living their everyday lives
Mhm.
and the camera's catching it. But Edie throughout the entire thing, even not just the dancing part, but when she was talking to like the guys that were filming it,
Mhm.
asking them questions and stuff like that, she felt it felt like she was performing
Yeah,
all the way through somewhat. Even though I think that was genuinely her and how she acts, but like she was very directly
yeah, she
cognizant of the
initiated.
camera and like yeah.
Yeah, anytime the filmmakers talked, it was mostly because little Edie initiated a conversation with them.
Mhm.
And I, from watching the film as a whole, I can confidently say like I believe that's because that was just her as a person being a very like almost social butterfly in that aspect. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and then because of the social butterfly aspect, she definitely butts heads with her very overprotective and introverted mother, and bitter. Oh, not bitter. Well, bitter towards the father or ex-husband. I think that
Not ex-husband. They
that
don't
had
believe in
to.
divorce.
I think that they mention the father slash ex-husband as Mr. Beale throughout the entire movie. Um, Other than like a few times when Will Edie says father. Um, and I'm not a socialite, so maybe that's just how people. And also, this was 1970. They did get divorced by the 1940s. They were definitely separated by the 1940s. The divorce, I think, was later on in the 40s. So I don't know if that's just how like people also just spoke at being a socialite and being like from like 50 years ago. Um, but I definitely think that trauma of having a father slash husband figure kind of just walk out for several years and not really giving closure affected both of them in tremendous ways and led to that codependency and kind of not hatred towards men, but like distrust in men, which might have also been why Big Edie, quote unquote, scared away all of the prospect uh, bachelors that came knocking at little Edie's door.
I found it interesting that earlier in the film when Big Edie was talking about all the people she had lined up for little Edie,
Mm-hmm.
it was like and just how mentioned how they were all millionaires.
Yeah.
And yeah, hmm, I don't I don't understand why that was so and well, I guess it was like financial security and stuff like that. But
Wasn't she like against it? Or did I miss that?
no, she was no, she uh I think it was only one man, the one man that little Edie wanted, that she kind of ran away.
Hmm.
But early in the film, she like was talking about how she had this one guy. He was a millionaire, but she little Edie didn't want to marry him. There was another guy, another millionaire. She didn't want to marry him. Another guy, he had even more millions. She didn't want to marry him.
Yeah.
And
Oh no, continue, continue.
no, keep moving.
No, I was gonna say that is odd because like as their own lives have like continued on, like they obviously like I think they were trying to exclude themselves from that socialite
Mhm.
way of life.
I wonder if that was before everything had happened.
Oh, it had to be. Well, yeah,
Because
Grey
now that I
Gardens.
don't remember.
Little Edie moved. If I have the timeline correct, Little Edie moved back to like live at Grey Gardens like year round in the 50s. So she was
Okay.
like in her late 30s probably when she moved back to Grey Gardens for like year round. So she would live in Manhattan for the most part as a young adult. But yeah, yeah, I'm fascinated by them. I watched this movie back in January or February of this past year. So it's only been like 2 months since I first saw it. But even watching it the second time, like it's a lot easier to even like read the plot and like have that tension build up. Um, like just to like notice it more, I guess, because I would argue this is a slow burn documentary just because of that fly on the wall aspect of not really propelling the filmmakers themselves not propelling the plot. If there is a plot, I've seen some documentaries where there's not a plot, but yeah. Well, that's kind of all the notes I had written down for tonight. Anything else about the film or Big Edie or Little Edie or even the filmmaking that you have? What?
Um, Nothing I can think of. Like you like I think I would have to watch it again to pick up on everything because it was like you said, it was a kind of a slow burn
Mm-hmm.
where you're not sure where this is going, especially like going like knowing, or at least thinking that it will be about the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like for me like 20-30 minutes, and I was like, oh, this is just going to be about them because they haven't really touched on the house at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of disoriented me a little bit because I was waiting for that. And I thought the rest of this was just kind of giving background on the characters and who they are and why maybe the house was like this. But
Yeah.
then, but I guess it actually kind of does if they're just these two people codependent of each other and don't really seek much help from other people other than a handyman and a gardener.
Yeah, I would even argue that the house itself is like a tangible representation of like their broken like status in society. They're not like kind of toxic, yeah, toxic relationship
Yeah,
towards each
toxic.
other. Um, yeah, because the house needs fixing up, and
Well, it's a
I think
one-way
these
property relationship.
what?
Well, actually, yeah, I would say two-way toxic because I was gonna say it's mostly the mother, but I think little Edie kind of blaming her mother for why her life hasn't gone the way she thinks it should have is kind of fucked
Yeah,
up too.
yeah, no, they fully rely on each other and don't take responsibility for their own actions, which is the yeah codependency at its peak, unfortunately.
I
Um,
know she passes away 2 years later, but little
yeah,
Edie was talking about moving at the end. Did she move within those 2 years, or was
no,
she
she
staying
didn't
there?
sell the house until '79, and then she moved to Florida.
Okay. So she was there up until her mother died, pretty much, or
I
after when she
believe
sold it.
so.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, funny thing too that I read about. little Edie selling the house was that the next owners who got it, I guess they didn't do a tour of the house. Just a heads up for
Oh,
those
that's bad.
who are going to listen later on for this podcast thingy. Um, tour the house before you buy it. Tour the apartment. Test drive the car. You know, like, but so little Edie told them the house just needs a fresh like coat of paint. And they bought it and they're like, no, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. um, but they did it and now it's worth millions. um, yeah, so but yeah, the house was it's a good backdrop and ends up being that good symbolism we like. um, but yeah, so anything else or
Oh no, that was that was it for me. It's a very interesting film.
yeah, I'm glad this they even made a they have spun this documentary into a play, a Broadway musical, another movie starring Drew Barrymore as Little Edie. Um, they even have a spoof episode of it for its pilot episode of Documentary Now. Um, yeah, its legacy has definitely carried on throughout the decades. But right, well, I guess we'll end it here for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, Vernon. And
Or
yeah, I hope you guys have a phenomenal rest of the weekend and week. And I will see you next Sunday. Bye.